Jesus sent two of his disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and just as you enter it, you'll see a colt tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here." Mark chapter 11, verses 1 and 2. Wait, hold on. Jesus told his disciples to steal somebody else's donkey. Hold on. So that means Jesus was a thief. Isn't theft a sin? Well, of course it is. But anyone who wants to misrepresent Jesus and paint him in a false light will use this to do so. This is another great example of taking a verse brutally out of context in order to fuel a narrative that is untrue. But before we dive into the context, why did Jesus insist that they had a colt? And not a cult, C-U-L-T, a colt, C-O-L-T, which in older translations of the Bible means a young donkey or a foal. You might get a different definition if you look up the modern definition, but anyways, that's what Jesus needed. He needed a young donkey. Well, in Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9, we hear this prophecy. "Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey." This prophecy is extremely interesting and specific, but not only that, it paints an incredibly profound image that Jesus fulfills also, that he is lowly, humble, and willing to serve and ultimately die for us. A lot of people claimed the Messiah for the Jews would be a conquering warmonger that would smite all the enemies of the Jews. However, Jesus comes in and shows that he isn't just for the Jews, although they're his chosen people, but rather he's peaceful and is for everyone that chooses to believe in him and follow him. He's going directly against what a lot of people thought he was going to be. He was doing it to avoid being flashy and to avoid being ultimately feared by everyone. Rather, he was humble and peaceful and here to serve all of us if we would just put our trust in him. This being said, let's now add some context to this verse. After Jesus says to get the colt, he says, "If anyone asks you, 'Why are you doing this?' say, 'The Lord needs it and will send it back here shortly.'" They went and found the colt outside in the street, tied at a doorway. As they untied it, some people standing there asked, "What are you doing untying that colt?" They answered as Jesus had told them to, and the people let them go. That's Mark chapter 11, verses 3 to 6. So looking into context, we can see that the people actually did let the disciples take the donkey. But Jesus still told them to take it, right? Before they let them, Jesus just assumed that it was okay to take it. So isn't that theft? How is that justified, in other words? Let's first remember that Jesus is God in the flesh. So technically, if you want to get technical, the donkey already belongs to Jesus because God created it. But let's say you don't entirely buy that as a non-believer, for example. Let's dive into other important lessons that are showcased in this same manner. Whenever Jesus does something that's a little bit questionable, a little bit on the edge, and you ask, why did Jesus do that? That's so cryptic and weird and sort of out of character. Why on earth would he have done that instead of doing something else that we know Jesus would have done? A wonderful example is when he denies a Canaanite woman, which I covered in another video. I'll flag it right there. But he denies this Canaanite woman, but doesn't actually deny her. What he does is he tests her faith. He turns her down a first time when she asks him to help her, but then when she professes him as Lord, he then obliges. See, this wasn't to put this Canaanite woman down, make her seem beneath Jesus. Rather, it was to show the Jewish people who this gospel was written for, that even evil people like the Canaanites who performed infant sacrifices could still be forgiven and saved if they confessed Jesus was Lord. So Jesus never truly rejects this woman. He knows that she is going to persist. He knows she is going to provide an example of persistent and honest faith. Therefore, he never rejects her or degrades her. Rather, he's showing an example. He's teaching with this. And although it seems out of character once you read into the context and understand what he was doing, it paints this incredibly profound message. This is exactly what's happening in this passage. To complement this perfectly, Jesus knew what the people would say, what the people would do in regards to the colt that his disciples were untying. See, he knew in advance that they would let them take it. One, because he's God in the flesh and he knows everything that's going to happen. And two, because it's a direct fulfillment of a prophecy that he knows. So there was no reality where the people don't let them take the colt. So Jesus knows that they're going to let them borrow it. He even promises to return it. Jesus also honestly uses God's will and the prophecy to tell the disciples, if somebody asks you what you're doing, tell them it's God's will that this happens, and then they will believe you and let you take it. Jesus is honestly understanding and using God's will to have something happen that helps him along on his journey. There is no lying here, and there is no theft here. He was simply honest about God's will. See, God gave us free will to either accept Jesus' teachings, to read into them, to know and learn that they're perfect and life-giving, or we can choose to reject them, to warp them, to twist them, to make Jesus look bad, pull them out of context, and be dishonest about them in order to reject a way of life that is ultimately going to lead us to salvation. The choice is yours, but I suggest you make an honest choice for the better. Even when certain things Jesus did look aggressive or out of pocket or way out of character, remember to read into the context and remember that Jesus was not always going to be nice. He had a mission, he had a purpose, and sometimes people do not like to hear the truth. And Jesus is the truth. So naturally, not everyone is going to like him, but he is nonetheless the truth. Thanks for watching. Follow the call to Christ, defend the faith, and God bless.